Welcome to our global market forecast, brought to you by Options21. Today we'll do a special analysis on Bitcoin. But first, let's go to our review of global indices. And in the past few weeks, we've talked about the synchronization of global indices, which is supporting an ongoing expansion in all markets, but focusing on the US market first, we know that from a pattern recognition perspective, we can see what's called an inverted head and shoulders pattern that represents a very large accumulation phase, which is very, very bullish. And I've said this for many weeks now. As the market broke above what's called its neckline, it's continued to expand. And I believe last week, what I did suggest is there's a chance that we will have a pullback. That pullback has started to, obviously started to happen, and the market's come back to a trend line as defined by the February and March lows. In the context of volume, 3 weeks ago, the best internal volume number is advancing and declining stocks. And 3 weeks ago, I talked to you about the switch in the volume of advancing versus the volume of declining. In fact, if I go back 3 weeks ago, I think back in early April, the volume of advancing was 66% above the volume of declining. April 12th, it was 68% above. April 18th, the switch, it was only 24% above. That's the volume of advancing stocks above the volume of declining. It's the volume which is the key. And then on April 26th, it was only 14%. And then on May 2nd, it started to go in reverse. Declining stocks were greater in percentage in terms of volume than advancing. So the switch occurred roughly, back in April 18th. And that is something that occurs coming up to every pullback, where you get forewarning of the market starting to do its pullback due to a switch in the internal numbers of the market. So it's a really good tool to look at. So in the context of fundamentals, we all know what drove that pullback. It was the discussions between the United States and China in regard to tariff agreements. But what now? Well, the market is still extremely bullish. Pullbacks do not dictate, a top of a market. There's a much bigger sequence that should occur in the context of pattern, volume, and fear. At the moment, standing here today on the 9th, all we can see is the market pulling back to its trend line. Now, I would say, though, if this market started to do something which was dramatically greater than that trend line, especially if it started to break below previous swing lows, something else is happening in this market. That hasn't occurred, and I don't want to overplay or make up things that have not occurred at this point in time. So I'll just say that we watch this particular market. I believe that it's still got a bit to go. I have calculated targets in previous weeks. Go back and look at previous recordings due to looking at the Fibonacci ratios, which reside above the current highs. And as markets approach those levels, I'll do in the background a deep analysis of the VIX and in conjunction with volume analysis and pattern, and see if we can see if there's any issues in regard to capital protection for your portfolio, which you would hedge if there was any issues or any potential for major tops, would start to hedge. Okay, let me go down and look at other indices which I believe are quite interesting. First of all, looking at IWM, which is the mid-cap index, United States, has been tracking sideways in what's called a time correction, but very, very bullish. And I think this particular indice, mid-caps, often lead the market, and you'll see that occur in the very near future. When this market bottoms out, we'll see a sharp break to the upside. Coming down to other global indices, which are very important. First of all, looking at Germany, Germany is in a strong uptrend, from its accumulation phase, still, punching into new highs only 4 days ago, has come back to the trend line, but that's what markets do. They have extensions, which are called rallies, they have distribution phases, then they have pullbacks, and then they extend once again. Doesn't matter whether I look at EWG or I look at the DAX, it's still the same picture. Strong uptrend. In this chart I've drawn a trend line of best fit, but strong uptrends that continue to move to the upside. Sticking with Europe, I'm just going to jump across to the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom, not as strong as Germany, but has been equally bullish. I would suggest there is a break of trend in the UK market, and that needs to be watched carefully. As long as the market stops where it is at the moment, it's just simply finding support on the neckline, and that's absolutely okay. And it'll be called a time correction if it breaks from here. So no issues yet with this particular market. Coming across to Canada very quickly. North America, strong uptrend above the neckline, maybe slowed down in momentum of late, but still nothing to be concerned about. The trend, if we define the short-term trend, it's still intact. Absolutely no problem whatsoever. Let's come across to Asia Pacific. Asia Pacific is interesting because of ongoing discussions with the United States in regard to their tariff agreements, and Trump's and the Treasury Department comments have caused a bit of a dip in this market in the past week. Is that of concern? Well, yes, it could be of concern if trade wars are not progressed, but I believe that the United States are very skilled in applying a great deal of pressure to get their point across and get a deal across the line. So I don't believe it's of concern just yet. And I actually thought that the general agreements were a little bit more advanced, but obviously they're not. And you'll find some policy response by China and or the United States will come out with something which will abate the fear of a broader potential trade war occurring. It's in no one's interest for that to occur. Absolutely no one. Not the United States, not China, and not all the affected parties around the world that depend on the two biggest economies to support global growth. Still in the Asia Pacific, just coming across to EWA, which is the Australian chart. The Australian index is called XJO, the ASX 200. This is EWA. It's representative exchange traded fund traded on NYSE, and it has been quite bullish, but still tracking sideways. Has had a pullback back to the neckline. Looks sort of like the European charts, like the English chart. I don't think there's anything to be of concern with this chart. Not as strong as other charts, but equally, as long as it doesn't break down below the neckline dramatically from here, it's still absolutely intact. There is the local chart, which is called XJO, is the code, and it looks quite bullish. If I, I've got the chart, I'll just blow it up a little bit. Got a few Fibonacci ratios on screen. I make note that the market has pulled back to the 50% and is starting to bounce. If I brought that down into a 60-minute chart, which I'll do just for the heck of it, what you'll see on a 60-minute chart is the evolution of a accumulation pattern, which is a W pattern. So it's a test and retest. Now, is it an accumulation pattern? No, it's not. And the reason it's not because it hasn't confirmed. So this market, to confirm this pattern, would have to go up, cross the midpoint, pull back, and then rally. And that's the point at which you've got a confirmed trigger to go long. That probably won't occur, in the current session, but will occur once the US finishes stabilizing and puts in its low and starts to go up. So just quickly jumping back to the United States, my belief is that it's probably putting in a low, but as I can't see the future, I won't try and call that low till it actually occurs. And one major signal that has occurred is that we'll see a pattern on a lower time frame. Market won't go too far below that trend line, and it'll start to break trend, all of which has not happened. So there's a whole sequence that needs to occur before we can call a low in this current pullback. Okay, last of all, I was asked to do an analysis on Bitcoin, and I have limited information with Bitcoin, but I am using a Bitcoin futures chart, which is absolutely totally fine. Okay, we know the Bitcoin had this massive rally and massive collapse, and that's all ancient history. What's most important is what's happening now from a technical perspective within the Bitcoin chart. So to get a really good idea of what's happening, we need to come down onto a daily chart, and there is something which is of interest, which caught my eye earlier today, and that is what's happening right now, which is only just confirmed in the last week, and that is if I grab my drawing tool, this kind of looks a little bit crude for people who haven't seen this, but this is what's called a rounded bottom. And there are patterns within that rounded bottom, which I'm not going to demonstrate, but there's a much bigger pattern, which is a very solid accumulation pattern. It is called a cup and handle pattern. And that pattern has now confirmed, and that is quite bullish. Now, this market is having some very large rallies. I mean, 2 weeks ago it was at 4,800. Now it's at 6,070. So there is a lot of interest in the past month. So since April, basically the breakout in April, there's a lot of interest in this particular contract since it broke out of what could have been called an ascending triangle pattern, and it formed a cup and handle pattern. It's all bullish. So this is quite interesting for those Bitcoin traders, and maybe we'll do a little bit of analysis once a month on Bitcoin and just look at the progression. Probably the most important thing for those people who are buyers of Bitcoin is signs of weakness and signs of technical weakness that the market is going to do the reverse, but that's not the case at the moment. This market is doing what's called a higher low, and it's confirming that higher low. From now, the strength of Bitcoin will be dictated by the depth of the pullback. So if you start to see shallow pullbacks that reside above previous swing highs, it becomes a really very bullish market, and they're points at which you'd add to your holdings of Bitcoin and build yourself a large position. I'm hoping this is useful to those people that are listening to this. If you want to call me or speak to me at any time, you may contact me at paul@options21.com.au, paul@options21.com.au, or just directly speak with Mike at New Brighton Capital.